I knew I did something wrong, but I got this far.
So you just have the reverse of that. Give you your 30. It'll be a 30-second delay, so it's faster on YouTube. But yeah, it's 10-second delay or so.
Let me know when it pops up and I'll go testing.
Yeah, just start counting. And you catch up. That's how you know.
I knew I'd done something. Something was off.
But yeah, you just had this reverse. That's all that was.
Testing.
Just muted the mic section, I think.
Major Gordon Brooks.
I'm gonna be on your right hand side.
All right. Good deal. Yeah, they have to get your nameplate set up. That if nobody knows.
As soon as I find out from
Push this way.
shake your hand. That's good. Are they gonna let Tommy come back or is he had it with
Okay.
us? All right,
So,
very good.
news is good news, isn't it?
I guess it may not be for him.
Oh, may not.
Philip worked for y'all.
He is, yes.
Thank you.
We'll do it. So we're asking, I understand.
Yeah, he said he's still. I guess he was with us. Well, we had brought him in as a partner. Him and Del Scott.
But I had to put it on paper to try to compare apples to apples. And after looking at what the other counties were doing,
I mean, I know what you're trying to do.
Celebrate. Yes, I mean, that's
Doing that since he left us for the bad.
for the
when his hands do, they used to cut it and salvage it.
No, actually, your
But
You
we
ready?
surveyed it.
All right, I'd like to call the work session, the January 2025 work session of the Louisa County Public Planning Commission to order. And we're going to start this evening with capital improvement. Well, actually, let me start with something else. I'm going to start this evening by welcoming Troy Painting to the Planning Commission. He's our new commissioner representing Jackson District, and we appreciate you being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'd like to begin with the capital improvement plan tonight. Ms. Colvin?
Members of the commission. Tonight, we're going to go over into some detail, some of the items that I shared with y'all at the last meeting. We're going to go over the items in orange, more because they're with economic development and things that are in your comprehensive plan. But if there's anything, like always, that you want to know more about, I have some more details and I can share those as well. So we're going to kick off tonight by going into information on with the Louisa County Public Schools for the new elementary schools, which are set for year 2030. And that can change, but just we're setting it on.
So good evening. Happy New Year, everyone. So yes, so one of the items on the agenda tonight for Louisa County Public Schools is the elementary school. As you know, currently we're doing an addition at Louisa County Middle School for the growth that we're experiencing within our Louisa community. We're also, we have our CTE center that'll be going in at the high school. And so that will help with growth there as well as far as capacity. So what we're looking at is really focusing in, and we've put a placeholder in March 2030 for expansion for our elementary school students as well. Right now, just to give you sort of an update and a snapshot of what that looks like, we have about 340 spaces left within our, I say left, until we would reach what we consider capacity at our elementary schools across the county, with the majority of those spaces being at Jewett because of the addition we put on at Jewett a couple of years ago. Right now, we have 2,496 elementary school students, and our capacity would be 2,825 elementary school students. So I want to give you a little bit of a picture of that. So if you think about, and we think about the growth that's occurring within our community, from 2013 to 2019, we fluctuated one student at the elementary level. So now there was a few ups and a few downs within that, but from 2013 to 2019 fluctuated one student. From 2019 to 2025, we fluctuated 174 students. So, and then if you look at it even closer, over the past 2 years, out of that 174, 128 students, new students at our elementary level, have come over the past couple of years. So just want to give a snapshot of why we think it's important to make sure that we have this on our radar, and certainly within the next few years coming, certainly going to need to be a priority of looking at adding space for our elementary students within the community.
Any questions from the commission? Mr. Goodwin?
Can't help but looking there and thinking about a Hollywood rock star with his guard behind him, his security detachment.
Well, there you go. I didn't realize they were standing behind me.
Standing right there.
But yeah, so, and in that, I've asked Todd and David, who are overseeing our projects at the middle school and high school, to also speak briefly, give you an update on where we are with our middle school project, in which you had obviously approved and gone through the Board of Supervisors, as well as where we are with our CTE project, to give you an update on that as well. So David and Todd.
Can I ask one question before
Yes,
you
sir.
step down on something you said on 128 students? How do they divide out elementary versus middle versus high?
Those 128 students are elementary.
All elementary?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm David Childress, and I'm one of the guys responsible for the middle school project. So I wanted to give you a quick update on that. We're excited about the progress. If you ride behind the school, you can see the brick structure, block structure coming up. We're about 40% complete on the building process. We're up to the second floor, and we are anticipating having have it completely under roof about April. And we'll have substantial completion late fall, early winter, and we'll be completing, moving in sometime November, December 2025. So excited about the process and the progress that we're making. So.
Yes, and we'd just like to thank you for your support on that
Yes.
project. And it has been going very smoothly up until the last few weeks. The weather was fantastic for building, and they've been working out there. And I think they'd taken 2 days off, and that includes, when I say weekends, they were there working on the weekends for the last several months. 2 days, I think they took Christmas Day off and
And New Year's,
Day,
that's it.
and that
Yeah.
was it. And they've been rolling. So, but obviously it slowed down a little bit in the past week and a half or so with the weather, but they've really been moving along. I think it is right at 42% complete. And so we're excited about the progress and looking forward to moving into that facility at the end of this 25 calendar year over this next year. Then so also update on our CTE center and where we are with that as well.
Sir. Good evening. I'm Todd Guido. I'm the other half of the construction team at the schools. We are very deeply into the planning process for the CTE Center. We have submitted our second site plan submission, and we're getting comments back on that. You have to do 3 submissions, so we're 2 out of 3 completed, so we're moving forward nicely. We have been reviewing 65% architectural plans for the CTE Center. Our next submission will be 95% plans, and then we are looking at taking it to bid in March. And with everything going well, we should break ground sometime around May for the CTE Center.
Any questions on either one of those items as well?
Apparently not.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have some projects from fire and EMS. For the next 5 years are the ones, our 20-year plan is in the big document, but we're going to go over the ones in the next 5. So this is Chris Hall. I should say Chief.
Good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. And thank you for your time this evening. With me, I have Chief Chris Lee. He is the Deputy Chief of Administration within our department. So you have a few items that is on our in our capital improvement plan, and I'm just going to go through them one at a time with you. We do have the training center remodel, and I'm sure that maybe you actually got an updated version where we moved this out. We requested this to be moved to FY 2027, and that's with $900,000 for an additional 3,500 square foot building, and this will hold 2 very large classrooms with bathrooms and a small kitchenette for lunches. This is essential with the growth in the department to hold fully certified classes. We have the capabilities within our department to do these classes, and we just need the space, and therefore we must send staff and volunteers outside the county to get these much-needed classes because we're unable to hold them here in this facility at the size that it is right now. The remodel of the current classroom would then be put in for FY 2028, and that would be to make the current building as it sits 4 offices, the bathrooms that it has, maybe update those with a shower, and 2 bays to house a current reserve engine and an ambulance. Many times during trainings, we will use those pieces of apparatus in the trainings. Currently, 2 offices are needed for the training coordinator and a lieutenant, and this will help us plan to add to our training division without having to do another remodel or request. Any questions on that at this time? All right, we'll move on to, I put the two stations together because if you see they're listed for the same year. New stations at Zion's Crossroads and as they have it listed, Ferncliff. I'm going to touch on both of these. These have been in the CIP for a couple years now. And as we begin to plan for the growth of the county in these areas, the current station at Zion's, along with the trailer that was placed there in late 2020, early 21, that was with COVID CARES Act funding that the county was provided. They're definitely not adequate to house our fire apparatus or the staffing needs. With the water system finally moving forward and the expected growth that we see coming to Zion's Crossroads area, along with the increased call volumes, will require future need for additional staffing and therefore also apparatus. As the station sits right now, we are very limited to the amount, length, and height of the apparatus that we can put in those bays. For example, we had to move a smaller ladder truck owned by the county down here to Louisa, and it is stationed at Company 1 because it wouldn't fit into the bays at the station in Zion's, and swap the current volunteer ladder truck and move that to Company 7 in Zion's Crossroads. The trailer that is there was never meant for long-term housing of the current 15 employees and will not be adequate for any more staffing. Ferncliff Fire Station, as is listed in the CIP, is listed for 2028, as well as Zion's. This will be reviewed through data, call volumes, response times, to see where the need is and when the need should arise. It will be a tremendous help on the southern end of the county and also along the Interstate 64 corridor, all up and down the areas that Louisa covers. Both fire stations, in addition, have a $50,000 placeholder in FY 2027, and that is for a study of needs and to make sure that we are putting them in the correct location. Any questions on those?
Go ahead.
Good.
Not
well,
on, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Goodman.
not on that one, on Newbridge, in that area. Are we full up and ready when the condominiums come online down there? I know there were a lot of questions when they came in with the application.
Right. And by up and ready, what exactly are you asking?
There were conversations about being able to reach the upper floors, water supply,
Right.
as well as, apparatus.
Oh, wait, yes. I will say that staffing has increased in Newbridge, and I'm going to tell you that if you're aware of Company 2's remodel that they have going on at their station, we had to move staffing out of that station as it sat. We did put some fire staffing at Newbridge, so Newbridge staffing is beefed up a little bit right now. That's great. That helped us. We put in a SAFER grant for additional staffing that we did not get. It was actually going to be for Newbridge, so in the wash, that worked out. Apparatus-wise, the only piece of apparatus that we have on order, not even on order, we are looking at putting in an order and looking at specs on is a brush truck at this time for them. So they will have a brush, an ambulance, a tanker, and an engine in that station. There's not going to be a lot more that station will be able to house right now, currently as it is, okay? It won't have a fire ladder truck in that. There is talk whether when we look at data, does the current ladder truck at Company 1, is that the correct place for that ladder truck, or should it be maybe moved over to Company 2? And therefore, it'd be a little bit closer to Newbridge, right, to meet those needs.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
It does, thank you.
All right. Then the next one that I have is the Louisa Volunteer Fire Department remodel. And a few of you remember that this request has been requested in the CIP for a couple of the past years. And we have looked at various ways we could make this much-needed additional space for staffing work. With the support of the Fire Chief Bubby Whitlock and his fire board, along with our administration staff and along with General Services, we believe that we have come up with a plan. We would like to take the existing fire hall and make it into bunk rooms, living and dining space, and upgrade the current kitchen with commercial type appliances and cabinets. Also, we would take the existing bathrooms that are in that fire hall and add a shower in each of the male and the female's bathrooms. As this station sits, it has a 3-bedroom and 1 very small bathroom, and was meant for a small family at the time when it was built. It was never intended to house firefighters, and currently we have 10 people stationed here daily. So that's 30 different people in total. 2 of those, as I mentioned, talking about Newbridge, are actually from Company 2 Mineral, where we had pulled their ambulance crew to Company 1. Their fire crew is in Newbridge. So 2 of those are those members, and once that remodel is done, they will go back to Company 2. So I didn't want you to misunderstand my number there. 3 of the members are in the house in those bedrooms. 4 are in a room that we put some beds in, and 3 are now in the fire hall in beds with no separation. General Services is currently looking at how to get some temporary dividers, and from what I understand, Loudon was actually working today to put up some dividers in the fire hall so that they could have some privacy and some separation. As you can imagine, it's very challenging when trying to separate male and female staff, along with keeping everyone safe and free of illness. Any questions on that one? Thank you. The last one I have is Locust Creek Volunteer Fire Department's remodel, and it is slated. Let's see here. I'll touch on this one just quickly. The Management Oversight Group, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this group, but it is made up, we call it the MOG, Management Oversight Group. It is made up of all of the volunteer fire chiefs of the county, okay, along with me and a few staff members, and we meet every 2 months, okay. That finance committee worked on some guidelines that they would request support of 1 station remodel needed, and that it would be based on staffing needs and firefighter safety is of the utmost when they were requesting their CIPs yearly. This is why they voted to move the Louisa Volunteer Fire Department request to the front due to the overcrowding of the staff members. Locust Creek was supported for the FY 2027 with additional space through a remodel, along with an additional room to the house to house the new drug box system that the state has mandatoried for all of the localities. In addition, they would add an additional bay for additional room that would be lost by expanding their living room and kitchen area into a current bay. So they're opening up that wall into a bay, and they're losing that bay space but gaining it in living space, and therefore was looking at putting an additional bay off to the side to make up that bay space. More discussion with volunteer leadership will take place to make sure we are looking at all the needs and to make the most reasonable changes as we get closer to this CIP year. Any questions?
No questions?
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you always for your support with moving projects forward. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have the General Services projects. We have Anderson Woolfolk.
Good Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the Planning Commission, I think I made the comment last year, you always ask me about the same two things. Didn't you want to know about anything new? And I won't be saying that again this year because y'all took me up on my offer. So anyway, I think normally I always talk about the landfill closure fund and the new cell development. They kind of go hand in hand. They're both basically savings accounts for the future of the landfill. The closure fund is, we know, probably around 2031, 2032, we will end up capping the current cells that we are in, which are cells 2 and 3, along with the cell 1 that's already temporarily capped. And that's basically a savings fund, so we don't have to put that much money out at one time. We're just saving up as we go along each year. The landfill new cell development is also the same thing. That is for construction of the next set of cells, which will probably take place in 2030 or 2031 as we prepare for phase 4. I just want to reiterate, because I say it every year, but currently we have permit 194, which is the landfill cell that is capped with a turf enclosure, and then our new cells that we're developing or that we're currently working on and filling now. When they get full, we will actually do what they call a piggyback in between the two, which will save us from having to build wall structures and everything like that. And then once that's finished, that's cell 4A, we'll actually go up another 60 feet above that for cell 4B. And that's basically what these two funds are for. They're savings funds, so we don't have to make one big expense in 1 year. It's saved up when we get to it. Does anybody have any questions on that?
No.
All right. So new things. I think I have talked about the Louisa Family Practice Medical Center renovations. Doctors Al Southall and Rex Harkrader have been in that medical building since, I believe it was 89, early 90s, something like that. This remodel is for that section of the building. We're not really doing anything, changing walls or anything like that. It's mostly just a facelift. We also have in the older section of that some asbestos floor tiles. Obviously, they're no harm unless you remove them, but if we're going to go in and remodel it, we want to remove that at the same time, because obviously Rex and Dr. Southall are both getting older. We're not sure what's going to happen when they finally decide to retire, but we want to be prepared to lease out that space to someone else in the future when that does happen. Any questions about that one? All right. The administration building, I kind of have 3 different projects there slated, 2 for next fiscal year, the upcoming one, and 1 for 2028. I'll talk about the 2 in 2026 first. The landscaping and Sallyport securement is actually for both sides of the building, where we have prisoners coming in on this, the eastern side of the Sallyport. We want to put a secure fence up and gate and everything like that. It just doesn't make a lot of sense where anybody can pull up as somebody is being carried in. It's not secure for our officers or anything like that. Same thing on the west side, a privacy fence, just with the things we have to deal with nowadays, it just makes more sense for security. It also includes landscaping around front. A lot of the plants that were put here when this building was built in 1996 were not, they weren't planned for to grow to full length that they are now. They weren't 30-year plants. We're going to put along more landscaping, stone stuff that's a little bit lower maintenance, make it less burden on our grounds maintenance crew. And also, I don't know if you've walked around the sidewalks here, about 5-foot sidewalk, you've really only got maybe 3 foot of sidewalk to walk on, so we want to get rid of that and just make the place a little bit more appealing. The other one, Commissioner and Treasurer and Commissioner remodel, that is mostly just for the windows there. Basically, the bulletproof glass is starting to break apart, and I have to replace that anyway. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with the window that we had at Community Development in the old Health Department, but they will be more updated, more flat, a lot more glass space, a little less 80s feeling, so to speak. So, and I'm going to have to replace the glass anyway. Those windows are about $20,000 a piece, so that's $60,000. So we have a little bit more to actually redo the countertops and everything. So we're only spending about half more than we would have to anyway on that. The county attorney's remodel is slated for 2 years in the future. That would be a remodel of, obviously, the Smith space. Just to make it a little more accommodating, it's always kind of been moved around and adjusted, and it's never really been, there's not really a true waiting space. There's no secure entrance to it. It's something that we've kind of talked about, and it's kind of been on the back burner for a while, and it's something I just want to make sure we get into the capital plan. So, any questions on any of those 3? All right. So I have a couple of building additions next. One is a new building, the airport maintenance building. Currently, we are in the process of putting up a small, well, I say small, but it's 42 by 48 storage building for the airport's equipment. They recently hired an airport mechanic to work on the planes, and where they had been storing all their equipment, which was purchased with a grant, and it has to be kept for 20 years, or they have to pay grant money back. So we're trying to keep that in best shape we can. So currently on my lot in the airport, we're building a storage building for them, and then we have that scheduled for 2028. In a few years, we want to go ahead and build them an actual maintenance shop to store their equipment in, and then they can use the hangar for actually working on airplanes to bring revenue into the airport. We would have liked to have built the airport hangar first and not wasted money on additional storage building, but the plan is that I will eventually use that for salt storage for snow removal, and then we have to have time to get everything sent through to the FAA and everything that has to be approved, DEQ and all of that, and that was going to take more than the few months since they hired a mechanic to get the space for their storage. So that's the plan in that. The other one is the building addition to the animal shelter. The current animal shelter is about 3,000 square feet. This would be adding an additional 3,000 square feet on it. That shelter was put together. It was an old slaughterhouse, actually, basically a barn. They basically remodeled that in the late 80s, early 90s. Back then, we were only getting about 700 or 800 animals in per year. Now we are currently at 1,500. We're doing a really good job of getting animals out for adoption and everything, but it just really needs to be updated, added on, give us more room. Right now, if we don't get animals out, we may end up having to euthanize for space. I don't think anybody wants that to happen. It's just really a lack of space for holding animals. And it will also give us the ability to give animal control an area when they bring animals in. They don't go immediately into the population. They don't know if they pick an animal up at 10 o'clock at night, if it has parvo or what it has. They bring it in. Currently, they have to go into the normal population with other animals. We're just trying to prevent something that could possibly happen in the future. Any questions about those? All right, I'll move on. We also have a grounds maintenance shop. That is going to be for the Parks and Rec Department. Currently, they have about a 1,600 square foot building that is basically one of the tube carports that you see put up. It has no heat, no running water, no bathroom, nothing like that, and it doesn't have it barely has enough room for them to store the mowers and all their equipment over the winter, which is, you keep those things outside, you end up having a lot more money in service and maintenance. The idea would be for them to build a shop on the front of the property. Their existing storage building would then end up being storage for the Betty Queen Center, because there's nowhere to expand that building, no place to put an addition because of the limited parking that's around it. After that, we would end up having a shop that would be 3,000 square feet put on the general services property. It also gets all of the equipment from everyone back off the road and out of sight. It will be heated and cooled. They will have a bathroom, and the two full-time managers, or the manager and the co-manager of that, will have office space in there to be able to do things. Currently, they don't have any office space right now. Any questions about that one? I want Steve to be doing a really good job of explaining things. So Human Services, the lower level access, and the Medical Center lower level improvements, they are both renovations for the basements. We were originally looking at what the cost would be for remodeling the basement of the Medical Center, and it was probably going to be somewhere around $2.9 million. Basically because of the square footage, it's almost 8,000 square feet, and we're going to have to tear up the foundation and redo all the plumbing lines underneath of it. So what we decided instead is we're going to actually turn that into the county's secure file storage, because it's a walkout basement. We can get our files in there. We won't have to redo the plumbing because you won't have anybody in there that needs it. It is a building that was built in 1952. And it's mostly block, and the way it's set, you can't really change any of the walls in there. So even if we're going to attempt to lease it out to anybody, they're stuck with the footprint that is there, and it doesn't give them very many options. So rather than spend a lot of money doing that, with the separate office spaces and all, now we can give each individual department their own file lockup. It makes all of our county files that we have to retain long-term more secure. You have less hands involved, and it just makes more sense. And the plumbing will have to be redone for the upstairs part of VDH, which is in there now, which we just remodeled last year for. But the idea is we'll be able to do that all above the ceiling, since we don't actually have to have bathrooms on the lower floor and get that gravity flow down there. So it'll actually make it just probably a tenth of the price of what it would have been if we did something for the basement. That was a decision which Chris Kuhn and Christian and Wanda and I all kind of came to. It just makes more financial sense. The human services lower level access is a plan to put office space in the basement of the former Virginia Community Bank headquarters, which we purchased in the industrial park, I believe in 2022, February, I think. And so we currently have 6,600 square feet of space in the basement there. We're going to use 2/3 of that to possibly put maybe 4-H extension in there or anything else. It seems like a very wasted space, but we want to daylight that first to get an actual easy entrance into it so we don't have to put any kind of elevator, and it's cheaper than doing anything like that. We would save an additional 1/3 of that space for future expansion of the Human Services Department. Any questions on that? All right, we'll move on to the last two. So the last two are at Circuit Court. The Judge Sainer, has requested that we are currently remodeling the OG building to have the Commonwealth Attorney move into, because they currently have 2 people sitting out in the hallway for office space. They've run out years ago. So once they moved out in the Commonwealth Attorney space, the judge would like a smaller courtroom to haul small like sentencings, small civil cases, things that don't have a jury in there, better acoustics, better security. We've already done a study on whether or not we can bring the secure stairwell in through an existing wall that's structural, and we've gotten a drawing on how we can do that. So that really this is something the judge has requested. And following that, this courtroom is going to be for secondary things now, but in the future, 3 or 4 years down the road, there may be the possibility of having a second judge. And so that goes hand in hand with the file storage remodel of the basement. Currently, I don't know if everyone's familiar, but when you go into Circuit Court, the land files and everything are to the left. They have gotten all but maybe 1/3 of what's there into the computer file storage, so they no longer need those files there. So we'd be remodeling the basement to store all of the files. We have to keep them all on file, as well as add high-density storage for all of the judicial court files. And then in the future, once that's complete, we'll then remodel the courtroom, or the room to the left when you go in, for the clerk to expand space when they start having 2 courts, because they'll have to add additional staffing. So it's kind of like a dominoes effect, everything I do. So any questions?
I do have a question on the land records that you all are putting in the computer. What are you doing with the original paper copies?
So those will actually go down in the basement and be stored.
So they
We
will be-
will have to keep them stored on site, but since you can access from the computers,
I see.
they'll go down in the basement.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good, thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
I don't see James yet, so we'll, yes.
May I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I held it because it kind of goes above general services. I know, what was it, a year and a half ago, we were talking about the relationship with the airport.
Okay,
And I see now that we have a second entry into the CIP for a maintenance building. Somehow I missed the finality of what is the relationship
Sure.
between the county, the airport, and the IDA?
absolutely. The airport came under the county's purview last April, or this past April. So April 1st, the airport's under the county. So now General Services maintains the airport. Andy and Brittany are here. They'll talk on the airport projects because now they're under the county. Of course, most of the airport projects are federal funded and state funded heavily. I think our portion's 8% for the county's portions for the big projects at the airport. But for the operating and all that every day, the airport's now under the county, under Andy's guidance, under economic development. The IDA still has their IDA board, and they are independent, still a component unit of the county. I am serving as the fiscal agent for the IDA. So, but the chairman of the IDA, I think that's the right title, Dustin, thank you. Dustin Madison will still sign off on everything and send it to me before it's paid. So they are still independent, and we still have the IDA. Does that answer what you're looking for? So the IDA and the airport have been separated, and we're waiting for FAA approval. Thank you, Andy.
I was just going to say the same. Yeah, the FAA is in the final review of the transfer documents to assign ownership to the county. We should have that in the next 30 days, I would think.
Because I know they're a separate legal entity, and you all are going through the hoops on that. So there's no issue for us building a maintenance facility off of the airport property per se.
No.
Because we're building that on general services property, right? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that,
Let me bring my team.
well, yeah, and the maintenance,
Gosh, the hard question took 3 people.
Yeah, so the temporary maintenance building that we're building is eventually going to be general services. For right now, because it was going to take so long to get a building approved on the airport's property, we're building a temporary storage building they can store their equipment in on our property, knowing that in 2 years, we're going to build them an actual maintenance building to move their equipment into on the airport's property.
Okay.
and let me just fine tune that. So anytime you get a grant from the FAA, what is considered the airport property, which is 240 acres now, you essentially, anytime you get a grant, you encumber that entirety of the 240 acres. So whether you're improving 5 acres over here and you've got 100 over here that are unimproved, you're still guaranteeing that, I think Anderson mentioned it early, 20-year time span that those buildings have to remain in, ownership and of the airport and operations for the benefit of the airport. So as we build the new maintenance building on airport property proper, we will be eligible for grant funding from the FAA and the Virginia Department of Aviation to store equipment that we use to remove snow, cut grass, things of that nature, everyday maintenance of the airport property itself.
Okay. All right, thanks. Appreciate the answer.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
James isn't here yet, so we're going to skip on to economic development. And after Andy and Brittany do the economic development, they'll go on into the airport projects.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Andy Wade, Economic Development Director. Hi, Troy.
Mr. Wade.
Big shoes to fill, buddy. Anyway, I'll start with the Shannon Hill Regional Business Park transportation enhancements. Essentially, this request is just to recapitalize the same CIP line item from the beginning balance in FY25. What we used the $136,000 for in the last fiscal year was to match a portion of a grant that we got from VDOT to design the road enhancements from the interchange on 605 all the way up to the most northern terminus of the Shannon Hill Regional Business Park, which is essentially about 1.8 miles of new road enhancements and improvements. So that design is currently well underway. We finally got VDOT to release the right-of-way acquisition, so we're in the process of acquiring the right-of-way. Currently, 605 is prescriptive easement, so it means everybody on both sides owns to the center line of the road. So we are running title reports and actively engaging the property owners to acquire the right-of-way to make those necessary improvements to the road for that span that I just mentioned from the interchange to the northern terminus of the business park property. So essentially, we're just recapitalizing the fund to what it was last year, and then we have future requests in the CIP out in future years. And this site is designated MEI, which is Major Employment Investment Site by the state, so that entitles us to an additional $2 million in grant money, construction grant money from VDOT to help offset some of the cost of the construction project. It will be a phased development, so we won't do the whole 1.8 miles at one time. We did a traffic impact analysis, and we identified 3 phases within that report. So our construction schedule will follow those phases, and essentially the first construction component will be the entrance to the business park. So it'll be right and left-hand turn lanes on 605, and then widening the pavement section. So the road there is very narrow now. The new construction will be, full width lanes. You'll have 3 or 4 foot aprons on either side, plus the ditching. So the new right-of-way that we're acquiring is roughly 80 feet wide. So it's going to be a big improvement to what's there currently. So, any questions on that one?
No.
Okay. All right, we'll move to the airport then. And quick introduction. Brittany Shoup is our interim airport manager. Brittany's been in some form or fashion with the airport for what, 2-3 years now. She also helps us with the IDA. I'm not sure what your official title is, but Secretary Treasurer with the IDA. Ed moved on. Ed took a new job at an airport in South Louisiana, so he left as of January 3rd, but happy to have Brittany. She's interim manager. She's got some staff there that are working for her, and she's doing a great job so far. So anyway, as we talked about, the airport is eventually, we're on the downhill side of it coming under the county's ownership. It's just a paperwork exercise at this point in time. Like Wanda mentioned, we are pretty much running it without title to the property at this point, but we're the fiscal agent, we're the oversight of the airport as of April. So you'll see a lot of, and you do see a lot of CIP items out into the future. A lot of those on the south side of the runway. That is our next focus of development for the airport. Currently, we have a waiting list of 49 individuals, pilots for T-hangar space. So that's a huge number. We mentioned grants before. Typically, our expense for non-revenue generating projects on the airport, the max it can be is about 20%. If it's a federally funded, state funded, and locally funded project, usually our share is only 2%. So we get a lot of bang for the buck with airport projects that we don't typically see in the public sector, but it works, and it's advantageous when we, have it can take advantage of those dollars. The ultimate goal at the airport is to expand the runway, extend the runway. Currently, it's 4,300 feet. We want to get to 5,000 feet. The reason we want to do that is because we want to have corporate jets. The limiting factor right now for corporate jets is not that they can't land on 4,300 feet. Their insurance companies don't like them to land on 4,300 feet. So, and it's kind of a building blocks. A lot of the things you see in the CIP are stepping stones to get to that 5,000 foot runway expansion. You've got to show a need before you can qualify for a lot of the FAA funding. So in order to show that need, a lot of these projects that you see in the CIP are demonstrating the need, and as we build those, we can check those boxes and hopefully get to the big money where obviously the runway expansion is going to be a tremendous cost. But I think that's funded at a 90%, 8% and 2%. So even if it's $20 million, that's a tremendous amount. That's a lot of money on the local level, but not comparatively speaking to what the project costs. So the first one I want to talk about is the south side apron taxiway hangar design. This is a site plan design. This is the 80-20 grant. So the Virginia Department of Aviation is going to fund $120,000 of this, and the county is proposing to fund $30,000 of this. And this is for the south side. That's the school bus road side of the airport. Happy to answer any questions about that. And in subsequent years, you'll see we've identified these as typical construction project with grant funding, federal funding. You've got to do the environmental stuff on the front end, then you've got to do the site plan, and then the construction follows that. So in subsequent years, you'll see a line item for the construction phase of that project as well. The T-hangars will be part of the site plan, but as I mentioned, we're not eligible to receive funding for the T-hangars because they are revenue generating, but given the waiting list that I just described, we can fill those fairly quickly, and the revenue generated from renting those is certainly enough to cash flow the debt service if we were issued debt to build those. Good?
Questions?
Question.
Mr.
Yes,
Goodwin?
sir.
When we get beyond to the development stage, long-term, have you all had discussions of what department will oversee O&M of the airport? Will it stay in economic development or somewhere else? I can't I can't visualize a good fit anywhere right now.
TBD. I'm happy for it to stay, but yeah, I mean, don't know. I mean,
Right now, it's economic
Yeah.
development.
Well, it's in development, and I get it. I'm just, was kind of thinking ahead, going, who's gonna do the O and M over the years on this?
yeah.
And
To
right
be
now,
determined, I got it.
well, we have the airport manager, which works closely with economic development. They kind of work.
Okay, thank you.
You want to pass those on? The next one is a $250,000 request in FY +26.
Thank you.
Brittany's handing out a diagram, a visual. It's a whole lot easier to explain it once you see this. But we recently completed or close to completing the taxi lane rehab. That's the pavement area around the existing T-hangars. As you go in the airport, it's on your right, immediately on your right. We resurfaced all those taxi lanes coming out of the hangars. This project would pave the entrance road to the terminal building and the parking lots around the terminal building, and then it would tie into the pavement section that we just completed on the taxi lane project. I'm not a pilot, but right now a lot of that area is gravel, and I understand that, you know, as cars traverse that area and they can carry a little small pea gravel into the taxi lanes, and if that gets hung up in a prop or an intake of an airplane, that can be catastrophic and cause a lot of damage. So this area has not been paved since the early 80s, probably since the airport was built. So anyway, that's the proposal for this. We had Chemung contractors out there. Just didn't work out for them to do it while they were out there. Just, it was better that it be put in this CIP for next fiscal year. But anyway, that's the request. And that probably, if approved by the board, that project will probably tee up early or after the new fiscal year, immediately after the new fiscal year. Happy to answer any questions about that.
No questions?
Tough crowd. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unless you have any questions about any other airport things. Good.
I had a follow-up with Shannon Hill Road.
Yes, sir.
You said y'all improving it from the interstate all the way down to the site, the main entrance into the site,
No, all the way to the very northern terminus of the business park property. So
all the way down there.
yeah, it'll, if you're familiar with the road, once you pass where we've logged, there's a small subdivision road. Well, actually, there's a single-family house that fronts on 605. We share a property line with that first house on the left-hand side. After you pass it, it'll stop there.
Will continue to be 2 lanes, but what's the cross-section? Is the pavement's gonna be how wide plus shoulders?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the pavement would be a typical, I don't know the answer to the pavement width. I can get it for you, but it'll. I
Whole
mean,
lot
what's
better
a
than what it is
typical-
right now.
Yeah, well, yeah. Oh, yeah. In that section it will be, and
Right.
then it'll taper back down to the,
And then
What you know today.
you're gonna have left-hand and right-hand turn lanes coming
That's
into the
right.
site.
yeah, it'll be a left-hand turn going north, right, headed south, descent.
That's great. All right.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
actually, I don't know what you call these, but it'll be a cross-hatched, I've always referred or heard them called suicide lanes. It's not a travel lane, but it's almost like a fake island in the middle of the two
Right.
travel lanes for a lot of the duration of that 1.8 miles. So in some sections, it'll be much wider, but it'll start to taper back down as you go further north.
And how far off is this?
So all 3 phases of the construction will be dictated by development within the park. So as trip traffic or traffic trips increase, then that will dictate when we do the additional improvements to the road. But to start, certainly the left-right turn lanes and pavement section width will increase within the vicinity of the business.
And I guess that'll be beefed up pavement for what may come in the future, the
That's
pavement
right.
design.
It is.
Okay.
It'll be your, whatever the ASHTO requirements are of VDOT.
Okay.
And then, obviously, that will go into the VDOT system, and we will dedicate the right-of-way to VDOT once we acquire all of it.
Okay. Thank you. Good news.
So, thank you.
Next, we have Parks and Rec, James Smith.
Good evening, everyone. So I currently have 3 projects for the Parks and Rec CIP fund. The first one is a community recreation center. I'm looking at request $2 million next year to go towards that project. If you're familiar with the Betty Queen Center, the Betty Queen Center is our site now for most of our events, pickleball, youth basketball, other sports and activities in the gym. And that site was built the Betty Queen Center was built in 2002. So it's, over 20 years old, and the population has doubled, but we don't have an additional facility to provide youth sports and to meet the demand. You probably heard a lot about pickleball lately. It's one of the fastest growing sports. We have it going on at the Betty Queen Center 5 days a week. And if we could have it more, we would, because the demand is there. We actually did a pickleball tournament on New Year's Eve, and we had 28 teams for that tournament, and that's on New Year's Eve. So pickleball is growing quickly. So we, again, looking for $2 million next year to be put aside towards the project, with the final goal of that, or the price towards that project being $11,500,000. And I feel like I've been talking about the next one for quite some time now, the aquatic facility. The aquatic facility would be, of course, be an indoor aquatic facility. We have put some money aside, $1.2 million. Then we're requesting another $2 million next year towards the aquatic facility as well, with the final $2 million the following year, and $3 million amount to finalize that project. And again, we have an outdoor aquatic facility. We're able to operate that about 3 or 4 months out of the year. And one thing from this previous summer is that we offer swim lessons as well as just the outdoor experience. We had 98 people on our wait list, 98 youth on our wait list for swim lessons, because we didn't have the time. We had the staff, but we didn't have the time or the space to be able to fit 98 kids that are from Louisa into our program. With that said, we were able to offer swim lessons to 146 kids in Louisa. So the demand is there for an aquatic facility. So this is something that I think will definitely benefit the community, but it's also something that, as we talked about in the past, will also benefit the high school and the school system. Right now, they currently travel to Fort Union for swim practice, and if we had an indoor facility, they wouldn't have to make that travel or make that trip as well. And then the last one is returning the skate park. It's been a kind of a hot ticket item lately. I think when the skate park was removed, they were told, I think it was by the Board of Supervisors, that eventually that skate park would be returned. And I'm looking to expand the concrete pad where the skate park used to be and replace it with a new skate park. So add a little bit to the concrete pad that is there, and then get some synthetic material, synthetic ramps and skating equipment there. So we return the skate park, fence it off, and probably have a security camera there as well. So, but those are the 3 items that I have. Are there any questions or? concerns.
Mr. Goodwin?
Do you have a location for these facilities yet?
I do not.
Do
I do
not.
No. No. The skate park, yes. That would be where it was before, that concrete pad adjacent to the aquatic facility. The other projects, no, I do not have a location right now.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any further questions or comments?
No.
No? All right. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Louisa County Water Authority projects. Pam Ballman.
Good evening. The first item on the list is for the Bowlers Mill Dam improvements. This is a continuing request we've made for the last several years, preparing us for the improvements at the dam. We did apply for and get 100% grant funding for the design and 65% grant funding for the improvements. So this is just the 35% that the county will have to put up to make the improvements to bring Bowlers Mill Dam up to the current dam safety regulations. Any questions on that one?
Yes.
Sir,
Mr. Goodwin?
You know I ask this question every year.
every year.
It was put in the code that the EQ would prioritize and fund the dam upgrades. Why are we having to pay if the code says they are to prioritize? When you get to the top of the list, they are supposed to find a funding source?
The way it has been described or explained to me, that the funding and that's exactly what's going to happen. That's why we've kind of spread this funding request over several years. That once we get to the top of the queue, if you will, for the funding, then we have to have our 35% ready to go to make these upgrades. That's my understanding of the regulation.
Has that changed? In the beginning, they had to fully fund the dam upgrades.
I-
We had to prioritize every dam in the state and take the funding as far down on the priority list as they could to upgrade them.
I have
It was not
asked
a
that
share
question.
program.
Yeah, I've asked that question several times, and the response that I've gotten is we don't have enough money to fund our own dams. We can't fully fund, private dams or other dams.
Well, that's somebody on the excuse me, I'm gonna keep on going.
That's
That's somebody on the regulatory side going against what was written into the code in the budget language when it originally came up.
This was through NRCS, the federal level, is what I was told.
Where's DEQ? They're sweeping?
DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, looks over
Okay.
oversees the,
DCR.
yeah.
Where are they?
They're
They just ignoring that section of the code?
evidently, because I haven't been able to acquire any funding from them.
You know, we're perfectly within our right to tell them we're not gonna upgrade it until you all come up with it, because that's what the code says.
I can check into that.
You remember, I was down there that year.
I know you were, sir. Yes,
In
sir.
that language. They're supposed to prioritize and fund. Okay.
Is there somebody I can check with at DCR on that, prioritize?
Out of the loop now for, shoot, I guess 7 years, but I remember the original language unless somebody's gone in there and changed it.
I mean, DCR barks every year, when are you going to do this, when are you going to do this? And so when the funding becomes available, we're going to do it.
Read it back to them.
Okay, will do. Any other questions on the dam? Bowlers Mill Dam improvements? And just as an FYI, we are doing the funding, we have done and the application for the funding request for Northeast Creek Reservoir Dam as well, but I have not gotten that application has been administratively approved at this time. the Louisa Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant ammonia nitrogen, we were put on notice with our last permit renewal that limit will be cut from a 1 milligram per liter to a 0.5 in our new permit cycle, which is in '27. This is an additional funding request being prepared for the upgrade, the county share of the upgrade that will have to take place at the Louisa plant to be able to meet that regulation.
Same question.
We will absolutely apply for
No. Same question that I asked last year. The technology to measure down to that? 'Cause
Yes.
when they first came out, they were demanding a level that they couldn't measure.
Yep.
Now they've got it.
And now they have the technology to measure to that. I will, we've already had the discussion with the folks at DEQ on this one for funding, a funding request, and we will do everything we can to get as much money for that as we can as well. And I have a few tricks up my sleeve that I'm hoping I can push this off into the future a little bit more. So we'll see what happens when we get to our permit renewal in '27. Any questions on the ammonia nitrogen upgrade? Again, this is sort of like, I think as Anderson said, a savings account where we're putting the money in to be prepared so that it's not such a big amount of money in one CIP year. And then the New Bridge wastewater treatment plant, it's a lagoon system that's giving us all kinds of trouble. It will be expanded. We're actually in the design phase for that now. But we did ask for some money, $500,000, $500,000 to make some modifications at the current lagoon system so that we can meet consistently permit limits as we move forward with the upgrade at the out at New Bridge at that plant there. A couple of the things we would need to do is add some equipment for additional aeration. Air is key in wastewater, if you know anything about wastewater. So we need to add some additional air. We need to add an additional chemical feed. Probably we'll do it as inexpensively as we can, but probably a shed where we can retrofit it with heat and some chemical feed pumps. And then we're also going to have to add, we have a real issue out there in the summertime because it's lagoons with algae bloom there. So we want to be able to put, they look like plastic, like balls in a ball pit, and you can put those on the lagoon and fashion them together so that the sunlight doesn't penetrate and cause as much algae growth over there. So we're asking for that this year as well. And that's all I have. I'll be glad to answer any questions on any of those items. Okay, thank you all.
So that's all the projects I had for you tonight. At the February meeting, we will have the public hearing and ask that y'all make a recommendation to the board. And if you have any other questions for me, or if you find some later, just email me.
Very good.
I have one last, this came up
Mr.
after
Goodall.
Pam talked. Why aren't we seeing anything in the out years for the water line going down to Shannon Hill?
That was funded last year. That's been
Oh,
funded. We got a big grant. Andy
Okay.
got 11, I'm going off memory, 11.6 million in grant funding. And then we set aside the rest with debt issuance that we've started that project.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a great
Thank you. All right, I'd like to move on next to Planning Commission bylaws, next order of business tonight. And Ms. Buckler, do you have a brief presentation on the bylaws that you pulled together after our discussion from the last meeting?
Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, and Patricia, I'm not sure if you had some additional information on the bylaws. I had sent out an email after the last meeting with the requested amendments that the Planning Commission had specifically talked about on page 10 of the packet. under item 6 for the roll call vote, and item 7 to include language after approval by a majority vote of the members present at that meeting. And then you all ask for information from other localities on procedures for work sessions. I was not able to find language in other locality planning commission bylaws specifically on work session decorum, but our own Board of Supervisors bylaws and rules of order does contain some language that you all may want to look at and consider on the process for the work sessions. We didn't prepare anything specifically because we didn't know where you all wanted to go with that. But we did look at other localities for planning commissions, and we were not able to find any specific language for work sessions.
All right. I think the first question at hand is whether the corrections from the last meeting appear to be what we were looking for. Anybody have any comments on that?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Goodwin?
I think I brought up both of these. I read them, and I think you all did a great job on getting that into
Thank you.
the bylaws.
And I did miss one. There's another on page 14 of the packet, which was dealing with the written correspondence received for public hearings.
Yes. I looked at the write-up that the board has on workshops. I guess the only question I have is, do we want to leave that last phrase in there about taking on other business during a work session? We typically don't do that.
That is correct. We typically don't.
Right. And I think we need a reference to it, if nothing else, to kind of build on it as we face things. But I don't know if we want to get into exercising powers. I'm happy with the way the board states it. It says it's for information and discussion. But to then go on and say that we're going to make decisions here as a commission, that would be a change in our behavior.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not sure I think it's appropriate to do that sort of thing in a work session.
I am curious, and I apologize for not doing my own research. Does this section of the code specifically refer to the Board of Supervisors, or is it more generally about county bodies that would include us? Do you know?
Answer to that question, but
If that would,
defer
if
to
it's specifically for the board, then it wouldn't apply to us. We couldn't make that reference.
And this is on page 19 of the packet, under C for the board workshops.
Yes, it's under subparagraph C. It says pursuant to 2.2-3707.
-3707.
From what I can see, that section just talks generally about the public bodies. It doesn't specify which public body.
So we could apply it to us as well, in your
It
opinion?
says all meetings of public bodies.
Okay.
Sounds like we
I
have,
don't know how the other commissioners feel, but I don't have any problem with, if we take that last phrase out of there. You see where it would stop.
The last sentence, I believe.
I think you put a period after board, only we call it the commission.
Yes.
Change the two boards to commission.
Right.
You take out where it starts,
You
if a
sta-
quorum
You take
is.
out if a quorum.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like I said, at least we put a placeholder in it, and as we continue our work, we got something to tag on to later on if we want to do something with work sessions further than this. Just my thoughts.
And
So is there, are you just, would you all like for staff to look at where would be the most appropriate place to insert that language in the planning commission bylaws? And then when we bring this back in February for the, I believe we have a public hearing on the bylaws?
We can.
For the final action on.
Since I didn't take it that far, I'd be happy if you just found a place to put it in there.
Okay,
I think that would be appropriate. I was going to ask for that, but
okay,
yes, thank you.
perfect.
And before we finish with the bylaws, the general question is there anything else in the bylaws that has come to anyone's attention that we may need to discuss about any changes that anyone would like to make? Not me.
Got all mine last time.
Mr. Quarles?
There's an issue that we've kind of discussed regarding the Planning Commission and its members and representation. We have two non-voting members. And it's of the thought that they represent the towns, which are represented also within the county by members. When we're discussing something, and in previous, this wasn't a real issue, but when we're discussing something, input is key to what we come up with a decision. As we close out the public from our back and forth conversation by giving them a period to comment, there's not a dialogue back and forth, but sometimes we have the town's input on things that are not germane to the town's business. So what I'm saying is they're representative from the town, says, okay, and we're discussing towers that are in Patrick Henry, or we're discussing something that's someplace else. That's additional input, and that can change the way that we think. So that's basically giving the floor to a position or like the town of Louisa and the representative from Louisa, they have two comments. We're not represented by two comments. We're Patrick Henry. Cuckoo's doesn't have two people. They're not voting members. So it's kind of like, well, why are they speaking at that point? Why are they allowed to speak when the public can't? And at that point, they're really no different than the public if they're not voting on that issue, and it does not have anything to do pertaining to the town. I didn't know how others felt about it, and we talked about it behind the scenes. And I wanted to know what the rest of the commission felt about that.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Goodwin.
Linda, you probably the closest thing we've got to a historian. And oh, by the way, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
What's the background on town representation? When did it start, and has it always been like it is, like it's being done today? Who initiated it?
So I don't know an exact date when it started, but I just asked Tom to look up in the code, under Chapter 2, I believe it is administration. It talks about the planning commission, but the bylaws do talk about participation for the town members, that they shall only participate in discussion of those matters related to land use within the towns and within 2 miles of the corporate limits of the town. And I believe that is actually the language that is in the county ordinance that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors. Now, this section was revised last in 2015, but I know because of history and how long I've been here that that's pretty much been the standard. It may have been 1 mile at one time and increased to 2 miles, but their participation has been limited to town items and a limited area within the boundary of those towns.
So, if I heard you correctly, this was a board decision.
Well, it's adopted in the county ordinance. I just don't know exactly the origination date of that language.
But regardless of when, it was a board decision.
Right.
So would it be a board decision to turn it around? Do we have even the authority to act against what the board has already voted on?
Yeah, I think it would be something we'd have to discuss. I'm sorry.
I'm old and hard of hearing.
Since it was a board decision, I believe it was something that we would have to take before the board first.
I kind of, as she explained it, that was kind of what ticked in my head, that I'm not sure we got the authority without going back and saying, Mother, may I?
And maybe we can find more background on,
Right,
or find something additional on that.
Okay.
Mr. Quarles.
Mr. Chairman, one of the reasons that this came up is that very issue. Previous to this, and I think Gordon can remember, we didn't have the town representative sitting up here. Okay, Garland and I think run it sometimes sat back here. But just like we were referencing our attorney, I think our attorney needs to be there and/or whatever senior staff person is there, because they're not needed at that point. We refer to the attorney, we're looking around, or staff or something like that, and that's one of the reasons that this came about. Just like she had to move to the front right there, that doesn't happen during the board. During the board meetings, they're there. So this is one of the issues with that. I just want to put that out there.
Mr. Barlow, you want to speak?
Just in that it was initiated to try and give the towns, the non-voting members, but to try and give them some voice or representation into the things that are pertinent or affect the towns. And like Linda just said, their discussion is supposed to be on things that are within, in the town or affects them directly. I'm not positive. I think it did used to be a mile outside, but I don't know what. I think there's things that, may be slightly outside of town, but are going to definitely have an impact on the town. and it was just to have a voice. They're still non-voting members, but so, to Alice's, Mr. Quarles's point, you know, it shouldn't, and I know sometimes it has gotten, the discussion has gotten a little bit wider spread, but it's supposed to be relative to things that are impactful to the two towns. So maybe you might want to look at, in going forward, sort of holding a rein on once it gets beyond a certain point in the discussion, still being pertinent as far as the two members are concerned to town issues. But I think that's how it all got initiated, was to, we had some things that were gonna definitely impact the towns, and they, you know, weren't allowed to do anything other than public comment. So that's how it got started. I think maybe in a few instances, the discussion has gotten a little further out than a mile or two from town. So you might have to rein that in, but I do think it's important for the towns to have some participation in what's going on, and that's the way it got started in that.
Yeah, I will say,
I got some thoughts on this, because everybody's making some good points. And the board didn't say how they are to participate. And if we wanted to have our legal member and our staff member up here, why couldn't we have 2 reserved seats? And then it is the chairman's job to say, this immediately impacts within 2 miles or whatever. We'd like to invite Louisa and/or Mineral up to say something. Then they get a chance to say something really closer to what they are, which is a member of the public. But they've not been stiff-armed. It's given you a mechanism to control how they play. It hadn't been a problem until the last 2 or 3 years.
Right.
I think everybody here will,
Well-
their participation, but it has, Supervisor Barlow's right, it's starting to grow a little bit. But that solution still recognizes them. The chairman can recognize them at the beginning of the meeting. But then it gives you a mechanism also to control when and how they participate.
yeah, it has, it is a little different. I mean, how we operate and how the board operates has been different, because the board has 7 members. We have 10 members by bylaws. And we're stretched when we have 10 people up. We only have 9 people up here tonight. When we have 10 people, we're really tight to fit in. My initial thought was that members should be present, and they should be participating. And I can see there's some flexibility in that as well. So that's the reason why the board hasn't had a problem with having the attorney and the county administrator up here, the staff-type positions up here, because they only have 7 seats around the table. We have 10 to fill.
Mr. Chairman, I might add, though, George referenced a couple of years. Previous to that, we did have our attorney there, and we did have, when Garland and Runnett were here, they sat either there or either back here. They didn't sit up here.
I'm just telling you,
I'm giving you reference before.
I get it, and I'll give you the reference. I sat right down there where Tommy sits when I started.
I understand.
And the
I
county
remember when
attorney,
you started.
and the county attorney sat next to me. And when we started getting full, the county attorney sat in the back. Helen sat in the back. Helen second sat in the back.
That was
Dale
prior to
Mullins sat in the
that was
back.
a couple years
Dale
ago.
Mullins second sat in the back. I mean, it has been going on for a number of years.
Right.
Once we started having 10 people up here, the attorney shifted them. And I remember the.
But we had
asking
the same number of people before.
I
That didn't change.
I understand. Mr. Quarles, I understand. Work with me here. I understand. I'm just saying that there's been a number of different arrangements over the years. I get it. If it's a desire of the commission to shift the two town representatives to a seat on the side and we call them up, then that's fine. We can do that. If that seems to be the best way to go, I'm happy with that too.
Mr.
But-
Chairman,
Mr. Kersey.
I would just like to share a little bit of history George was looking for.
Now, please, Mr. Kersey.
Back in the 80s, the towns had active votes at the table. All were voting members. And I had some of the same reservation that Mr. Qualls has and led the board to adjust the picture that we see now. And the town was stripped of voting at the table. But I would caution that we don't want to create a situation, and at that time I represented Mountain Road and I represent Louisa now, but we need to be cautious not to designate our towns as second-class citizens and put them at the back of the bus. I don't think that's in the best interest. I know there was a lot of negotiation to make this change years ago and strip the town of their voting rights at the Planning Commission, except in instances where they were specifically involved. So I think we should be cautious and not have a desire to give the towns more representation, because that was my concern. At that time, if the towns got together, they had an immediate 4-vote block to push certain issues, and some of the issues that they voted on were not even allowed within the county, within the town, but they were allowed within the county, and yet they would have a strong voice. So I think we have a good balance, but I just wouldn't want to see our towns pushed aside and made to feel like they're second class.
Comment.
Mr. Quarles?
I don't think that our effort would be to make them seem like they're, in respect to what you said, second class, but we also don't want to get back into that dual representation thing, that the commentary that shapes the way that we vote. And then, you know, if a person's able to interject, if somebody from the public is able to interject again, that is something that we take into consideration. That's intake. We're taking that in, and that can shift the way that we vote. So the effort is not to push them aside or treat them like they're second-class citizens, but it's also to give a fair number of voice, if you will, to what we consider. And that's, if that kind of straightens it out. It's not that we want to push them aside or want to treat them like they're second-class citizens, but want to be also fair to the districts that are not represented in double capacity.
May I respond, Mr. Chairman?
Kersey, yes.
I agree with you probably 99%, but the only thing that I would add is that they can sit with us. They have an active participation, but these folks should have a governor within themselves that prohibits them from speaking on items that are not within the town. They have a responsibility. They know when they are appointed by the town what they're supposed to do, if it's 2 miles or 1 mile from the town limits, and then they're not supposed to interject to the other discussion. I mean, the chairman can call them down. I certainly think that that is your responsibility, but you shouldn't have to exercise that every meeting. And if it becomes out of hand, then you may have to take them to the back and talk to them. And if we can't correct it, then you will, because you're the chairman, and we expect that.
And I apologize if I have not exercised that quite as much as I should have in the past. However, I will say that the one town member that interjected things was generally not interjecting things that were specific to whether or not we should vote on something, but it was generally a methodology kind of question. So I kind of let some of that go, and maybe I shouldn't have. So I apologize. I've set a poor precedent there. That's an action for me to do better should I, have this job again. So.
Never was a problem.
Mr. Brooks,
I know exactly where Alice is coming from. He put it very well. We don't want to hurt nobody's feelings, and, this came up a few months ago. One of the representatives from the town wanted to know why they didn't have voting rights.
yes.
And I think we just casually, everybody gave their 2 cents about that, and that went away.
And he wanted to go into executive session.
Yeah, so
Very happy about
and Matt is right. They should have their own governor in their mind, but some folks don't.
But this is a legal question. If they're a member, whether they're voting or not, they're still a member. Aren't they permitted to go into closed session?
No.
Wait a minute.
As a member, I would have to check, just because there are different rules relating to them, just like they're non-voting, so I would definitely have to, I can get back to you on that, but I would want to make sure.
The bylaws call them a member.
Yeah.
It does say that they're a non-voting member, but they're a member. And he was upset that he couldn't go into the executive session.
Oh, he was, okay.
I just wondered if there was a law that,
I will definitely check into that and get right back to you on that.
So in this discussion, let me just make one clarification in what we're talking about. Is there a change to the bylaws that we have now that needs to be made to resolve this question? Or is this question more a seating question? Where are we in the discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dickerson.
I would say it's a need for the change in the bylaws, possibly after you do your research from member to representative, and clarification on whether that representative goes into executive session or not. Also, to manage, it'd be great to have our parliamentarian with that set of skills at the table instead of in the background to stop us when we go over that 2-mile limit, or we get caught up in the discussion and kind of forget some of the things in here that we need an extra set of eyes on. So personally, I like having the parliamentarian attorney at the table.
I agree with
Those are my
that.
comments.
I agree with that too. And I have a question. Doesn't the senior staff member present at the board meeting, supervisors, have a small table sitting there at the end? Why couldn't we have one there and one there for you and for the senior staff member?
One where?
Now we've got eye contact
Oh,
with
you mean just like right
staff.
up front here?
Yeah, just like, I think the senior staff member sits like right in front of Linda there facing the board, doesn't?
Mr. Goodwin actually sits where Mr. Cruzy is sitting.
Oh, he does.
And the county attorney sits.
Yeah.
I said, yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay, all right.
Again.
I was wrong. I thought he
Numbers.
had like a separate desk down here.
did before they redid the room.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. It was kind of nice because they had eye contact and you weren't turning around and trying to do this and all that.
Same.
I don't know, I'm just trying to think, because we do have extra members that the board does not have.
Yep.
Our county administrator has, as well as I remember, that's where he typically sits. right on that corner. And the attorney has long, as far back as I can remember, has been seated right here. I do know exactly what Mr. Goodman's talking about. We have had a table set out there where Mr. Gillespie or whoever would have a place to put the papers and stuff like that. But I think, the county administrator and our attorneys have always sat on these two corners. You do have more members, and I was trying to find it in here. I thought in the past it had been referred to as town representatives. I didn't realize that had gotten included as members of the planning commission. So
I think Mr. Dickinson's got a good point. Why don't we change the wording in that section and call them representatives and not members?
Is that going to require that it go back to the board, since the board came up with all of this? I'm just asking the question.
Mr. Chairman, if it requires going back to the board, let it go back to the board.
Well, I understand, just trying to find out, how far we have to go with, that's all, so we'll know where to go.
I'm a little bit at a loss here because I don't remember the planning commission bylaws are not set up by the board.
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask that too. Do you recall who made that change from town to member to representative?
Yeah, I would have to go back and look at the
Okay.
history, but under Chapter 2 of the county code, under administration, there is a section regarding the planning commission, and the exact language from that code section is what is in the bylaws regarding the town members. And they are called, although I can't sign into Tom's computer right at the moment, they are called members in the county code as well.
They would have had to be to have votes.
Yeah, so it says, one member shall be a member of the Mineral Town Council and shall be appointed for a one-year term each January by the Mineral Town Council, and one member shall be a member of the Louisa Town Council, and so on.
So apparently the fix all around is to make them representatives instead of members.
But
That's one thing, and it gets you out of the question of what they can and can't do. When you say a member can, they're not a member. Things like executive session and what have you.
Yeah.
Well, what I'll do, Mr. Chairman, is work with Linda on that, and
Yeah.
we'll come up with
Please.
something.
Thank you.
We can do some research, we can look at the language, and, if we need to, we can maybe come up with some options, talk with administration and maybe general services about some seating options if we need to.
Well, I would observe that at least until Mineral acts and provides a representative under the way that it's described here, as we've been doing, we have an extra seat.
Right.
So there's no reason why, Ms. Smith, you couldn't join us in that position there. And maybe we'll have the whole thing resolved by the time they make an appointment.
Okay.
How does that
I could
sound as a
quit.
pathway?
I could quit and free up one seat.
It wouldn't be free permanently, I don't think. Is that a pathway that sounds acceptable to everyone?
It does. It's, I agree with Ellis. I think it's a sticky subject, but I think we do need to address it because it was coming close to getting off the rail there for a while.
All right.
And I think it's gonna take sitting down and talking to whoever the reps are and explain that we've got a physical problem here.
Yeah.
And we've got an operational problem here of not having, ready access to the attorney, and we're looking at solutions. let them try to come in and say, I'm willing to do this. They might find out it's easier than you thought, rather than dictating it to them and then slapping a label on them as second class.
I didn't mean to slap in second class.
No, I mean, no, somebody else said second class.
You're a
I'm
nicer
sorry.
person than that.
I
I may look mean.
All right, so then I guess the action from here is, Ms. Smith, between you and Ms. Buckler, we're going to find out what needs to be done
Yes.
in this and what the path forward is. And we'll also pick up the section on work session on the board and bring it in.
Okay.
Very good.
So just to clarify, if we don't have complete resolution to the town members
I don't think.
by the next meeting, do you want the bylaws on that agenda for adoption with the changes that we've talked about? Or do we want to hold off for further discussion?
Well, are we required to have an action on it in February? I didn't see
I don't
anything in the
think you- I don't
bylaws
think
that
you-
required us to have an action on
I
it.
don't think so.
So then if not required, then we should probably hold off
Hold off,
until we
okay.
have a final resolution and we
Okay.
do it once.
Perfect. I
'Cause
just
don't-
wanted to make sure what your desire was.
I don't think we're way off the rails here right now, so, good.
One last question.
Mr. Goodwin?
If we were to come up with some idea that involved the two tables, I mean, you use the table over there now, and we just move you in closer so that you are part of this group. And if there was the attorney of staying there or whoever sits there, whether it's a representative, do we have a sound system to extend from this podium down to two desks?
That is something else we will have to research with our IT department because I don't know the answer to that.
Because whoever sits, if we end up going with it, then whoever sits there has got to be part of the public record.
Right.
And so,
We will.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brooks.
something Mr. Barlow just asked is, are those members paid for the town
I didn't give them
representative?
That's,
Yeah,
it's above my pay grade.
yeah, they pay you.
They are?
Believe so.
I mean, by the county for being a planning commission member.
I'm not positive whether the town pays them or the county, but I know they pay you.
That's all a part of
Yeah.
looking into it.
There's a representative right there.
Yeah.
where you going, what are you getting at? You gonna file them?
Well, if you're getting paid or you're a representative or a member.
Mr. Purcell? Yes. Do you receive a separate pay of any amount for attending these meetings?
That was the,
Well, that's a resolution to that, but it'd still be good to make absolutely sure.
right.
Because maybe we owe you back pay. I don't know.
If he's a member.
He looks disappointed.
So that may be the distinguishing between a member and a representative.
Might be.
It may be.
And we just open up a lot of questions here.
We uncover. All right. If we are done with that for the moment, we have run late tonight.
Again.
I'm willing to move the proffer question into next month, if that's,
Mr. Chairman, I do just have a short handout I could give you all.
okay.
Then if there's any questions you have, then you can let me know.
That'd be great.
This is just something you just work with another staff member just to kind of guide. And if it's helpful, let me
Good.
know. If it's not, let me know and we can,
Very good.
instead of just going over this, right, that one. That one you can have that.
Thank you.
If anybody has any. It's just kind of a little guide to try to
Okay.
help
Thank
clarify.
you,
Great.
thank you.
And the focus area plans, I think we'll probably be putting them off one more month.
You know,
I'm gonna pick that up and put it down somewhere.
you have
I
the
know.
option of calling an extra meeting.
I know.
Next month works.
I know. No, this is, yeah, okay,
The
very
only
good.
thing is, if we start bow waving, that thing gets bigger and bigger.
Ah, yeah, you're
Well,
right.
yeah, I'm afraid the capital improvement plan caught up with us this time in the schedule, last month and this month, so,
Typically does.
yeah.
Blame it on the snow.
So, and the snow. Very good. So I'm going to adjourn then the work session, and we'll be